Good afternoon. I am calling to order our regularly scheduled meeting of the Intergovernmental Relations Committee. My name is Elizabeth Glidden. I'm the chair of this committee, and I'm joined by council members Fry, Cano, and Andrew Johnson, and we are a quorum of the committee. So we have 3 items on our agenda for today. Each are short discussion items, and the first is an update on federal, state, and local issues. And we are joined by Mr. Ranieri, who will give us some information about what's been happening at the Capitol.
Madam Chair, members, thank you very much. I am Gene Ranieri, the Director of IGR for the city, and there's several things are happening. The legislature came back from break on Tuesday, and they have been at a fairly rapid pace since then. Many of the committees are trying to put together their finance bills. Representative Garofalo has his bill done. Ag will be done tomorrow. Environment is in process. The tax bill will be a little slower. We'll probably see that a little later in the House. The Senate is doing the same thing. So an awful lot of policy committees are not meeting because it's past the deadline. In some of the fronts that we're concerned about, in the area of local government aid, as you're aware, the governor was proposing what we have now under current law. There is a bill to increase LGA by $46 million over the biennium, which would mean an increase to our city. There's another bill, too, that would reduce aid to cities of the first class. Not all cities of the first class, but 3 of the 4 cities of the first class, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Duluth. What it would do is say that we can get only the average per capita amount of all cities, and that is for all cities in the state. We now have a per capita amount of $194 per capita, or about $76 million. Under this bill, we would lose $40 million and go down to about $37, $38, $39 million. That would be this year as well as next and subsequent years. The bill was heard yesterday and again today. There were about 10 people, associations and cities, who spoke against it. No one spoke for the bill. There was a rather robust discussion. The bill, we don't think will hopefully not move all the way through the process, but it generated a lot of discussion about the formula, and we will see what happens as the bill moves forward. There is no companion in the Senate, but it may be in the committee report that comes out probably next week. So I can stop and answer any questions on that because it is a big issue. We had the League of Cities, Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, Metro Cities, all the cities. We had the Police Federation, the professional firefighters from around the state, and a couple of AFSCME unions all speak against it.
I don't know what there is to say actually on this other than we appreciate the update. Clearly, this is a very dramatic proposal, and I think sometimes we don't know all the reasons behind that, other than we need to tell our story of how we keep serving the public the best that we can.
And Madam Chair, Ms. Bergman made the presentation on behalf of the city. Representative Dabney's on the committee, and he did a wonderful job of talking about what was happening in St. Paul, in Minneapolis and St. Paul. And St. Paul also had their IGR director make their presentation. One thing we did learn is that our LGA, in terms of general fund ratio, is 17%. Duluth's around 37%, and St. Paul's about 24 or 25%. So it was surprising to see how the disparities between the 3 cities. In the area of the pensions, we have talked about before about MRF with it being merged into PERA, which would mean there would be a actuarial evaluation and come back in with some new numbers. They were released last night. The commission took an amendment that basically did all the technical changes to MRF, but also inserted that number, which is $37 million, and then made an allocation between the state and the employers, and they went with a $17 million contribution from the state and a $21 million contribution from the employers, which is about $6 million less than what we do now. The bill's got a ways to go yet. It needs to go through some of the policy committees in the House and the Senate, and then probably go to a conference committee.
So if you could just repeat, Mr. Ranieri, what was the result from the committee?
The committee did approve that amendment. It was offered by Representative...
And how much of a reduction was it? Or?
The reduction, right now, we in the state are putting in around a $51 million contribution. The number last night was $37 million. We suggested a pro rata reduction. It's not exactly pro rata, but employers would go from 27 to 21. Transportation, the House released their bill. There is little or no money in there was more money in for highways and bridges than there is for transit. They're taking some money out of the general fund and putting it into special funds for highways and bridges. There is no general fund bonding in there. It's a separate bill, but there is some money for the trunk highways and things of that nature. They also set up a few new accounts where money coming from the general fund would go into those accounts and be distributed out. One thing they're also doing is putting some money into the municipal state aid program, which would increase that by about, I think, $30 or $40 million, and which would be if it holds, it would be for the city probably an increase of $3 million. In terms of the bonding bill, the governor released his, and it's $850 million. We haven't seen the language, but there are lots of things online which we can send to you. It does have funding for the 10th Avenue Bridge at $31.8 million. It also has some funding to do the design and pre-construction for the Kellogg Boulevard Bridge over in St. Paul. That's $7 million. Much of the money, or most of the money, is being used for what is called improvements to state facilities. That's called HEAPR. Would be things like at the University of Minnesota, heating systems, air conditioning systems, tuck pointing of buildings. Lots of just improvements, not expansions, but improvements to buildings, making them generally more energy efficient and things of that nature. A lot of the money is going in there. We have a lot of state facilities in our city, and an awful lot of the proposal is to do things like, for example, I think it's a $50 million request to do HEAPR improvements at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus. There's also a bridge at the Veterans Home in South Minneapolis being proposed. And throughout the state, there are proposals, and I think if I remember the numbers right, it's a split, not 50-50, but it's a pretty even split between greater Minnesota and the metro area. And more to come later. There's a hearing going on now, and we expect the Senate to start their hearings next week. In terms of working parents, the bills dealing with fair scheduling, time off, sick leave, there was an informational hearing in the Senate yesterday, and we're not sure exactly where those bills are going, but there was an informational. In other words, there was no vote. In terms of LPR and body cam, nothing new to report. They're waiting in in finance committees. Sunday sales was also a discussion yesterday, a informational hearing. What happened basically was both sides were given 30 minutes to make their points, and no vote on the bill. And I'm not sure what's going to happen. Both of the liquor bills are on the floor, and this bill is still in an informational hearing phase. In terms of the issue dealing with preemption and local control, we had talked about this before. It was in a separate bill. It has been folded into the large omnibus economic development, environment, energy bill, and that's going to be heard over the next couple of days. There's also a discussion about making some changes to that bill to reflect some concerns raised in committee hearing. No changes have been made. And there's no hearing in the Senate on that bill, and we're not certain what the Senate's going to do. In terms of urban agriculture, I know that Representative Clark has worked on that. There will be some language in the ag bill. Unfortunately, I have not been able to see the new language because it's changing as we go along. In terms of the driver's license bill, no activity since we last met. And Madam Chair, the other one is the Uber, Lyft, or Transportation Network bill. Again, no action since because the bills are in finance. The things we're tracking. I'll stop and try and answer any questions.
Well, thank you for that report, Mr. Ranieri. And I know, too, that we're kind of at the point in the legislative session where you often are asking for assistance from policymakers as needed, and so that's just an alert to committee members as well. And I know Mr. Ranieri and his staff are good at reaching out, as sometimes these opportunities comes and sometimes they don't. And so I really appreciate, I know the committee was really engaged in the last session, and I know we're ready to assist as needed this year as well.
Madam Chair, this is a time when it's going to happen, so we have your office phone numbers and others, and we'll contact you. There will be some actions in the next couple of weeks that impact cities, and we'll be in touch.
All right. Well, if that is the report, I don't see any further questions, and so since this is a verbal report, I don't know that we need to receive and file. You can go ahead, so I'll go ahead and move to receive and file this report. All in approval say aye. Aye. Opposed? I don't know that I've ever done that, but anyway, okay. It's actually all taken down, as you can see. And we do have a second item. This is regarding federal representation services, and I'll let Mr. Ranieri kind of, the item itself is perhaps fairly mundane, but I think the environment in which you are making this recommendation, we should hear as a committee.
Sure.
So,
Madam Chair, thank you. First part of this RCA is basically to extend the contract for Faegre BD Consulting for 5 months to July 31st of this year. That would give us some time to discuss what do we want from services in Washington, D.C. When we started enhancing our services way back in 2008, it was a different environment in Washington. There were earmarks. There were actually budgets and appropriations. Since then, we've seen in 2009, 2010, and we benefited from it, was the funding of the Recovery Act. And the city was very robustly involved, and we did a lot of projects through the Recovery Act, one being the Camden Avenue Bridge, others being some energy projects. We had enhanced CDBG, and we also received some money for housing and foreclosure. Since then, though, things have really come to a grinding halt, at least in Congress. There has not been, I think, an adopted appropriations budget in several years. There has been no earmarking, no new programs. The president, the administration has been working through their agencies with joint effort programs like Promise Zone and such. What we're suggesting is maybe we should take some time out, and analyze what we need in Washington and what we should try and do there, rather than continuing with the contracts we now have. And generally, I just think it's time for us to do that. And that's our recommendation. So the recommendation one is to continue the contract, and the second is that we would want to get a work group together between ourselves, some of the other city departments, and policymakers to decide what's the best way to go. Because we're spending almost $200,000 on these activities, and we just need to think about what's the best way to do it.
thank you for that, Mr. Ranieri. I'm not seeing questions, but I just think it was important for council members to know that there's some reevaluation, and I agree that it is needed, that staff is going to do on this bundle of services that are how we engage with the federal government and what's the best use of our money. So I will move to approve this item, which is authorizing extension of the contract with Faegre BD Consulting through July 31st, 2015, and increasing by $50,000 for an amount not to exceed $410,000 to allow IGR staff to complete a new request for proposals. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, on approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And that item is approved. And finally, then we are to our last item, and this is a report with a recommendation to council regarding our Minneapolis sister city relationships. And I think that Mr. Kronk is with us today, our city coordinator, to introduce the topic, and then our speakers that have joined us to give the staff report.
Thank you, Chair Glidden, council members. As the chair mentioned, this is an item before you to talk about our sister city relationship. As you know, the city of Minneapolis has had 54 years of history working with sister cities, 12 of them right now. And we wanted to take a minute to really re-examine that program and really pause the effort of putting new sister cities on, but really having a robust conversation internally about what does it mean to be a sister city with Minneapolis. So to explain the RCA and also to answer your questions, Bill D from Meet Minneapolis will introduce it.
Thank you, and welcome, Mr. Deeve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Council members, you have an RCA in front of you today, and it's our recommendation to temporarily postpone the creation of any new sister city connections at this time. We would like to review this and come back, staff would come back later this year to report back regarding the number of sister cities that we currently have and the capacity to have more. The engagement and involvement of our current sister city connections would be examined, and whether they should be continued, and also other status options for sister city relationships. As you're aware, we have 12 sister cities. Currently, in 2009, our office, together with the coordinator's office, was tasked to put a framework around the program to examine the relationships we did have, and if there were organizations or committees that were inactive, to try to engage them and make them more active, and we've been successful for the most part in doing that. Of the 12, we have 10 committees that are doing great work, and we're trying to work with the other 2 that are a little bit inactive at this point to engage them more in developing a relationship that we've had for a number of years. You may not know, well, since that time, we have developed 3 more sister cities: Cuernavaca, Mexico, Najaf, Iraq, and Bosaso, Somalia, most recently. But every year, I think the last 2 years, we've had about 10 inquiries from citizens and from organizations that are interested in developing additional relationships with the city of Minneapolis. We have 12. We're quite busy. In addition, this year we are hosting Sister Cities International's convention, so we'll have 550 some delegates from around the world here for that convention. And we will also welcome 9 delegations of the 12 sister cities will be here at some point during this year. Additionally, we have 4 groups that will travel abroad this year that we help staff and get ready for their programs to travel abroad. So it's quite a busy year, and we think this is probably the year to pause and to re-examine the program and to look at how we add additional ones and if we have the capacity to do so.
Thank you very much for that report. We do have a question from Councilmember Cano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Bill, I wonder if you could just tell our committee a little bit about the, I believe this summer there's going to be a big Sister Cities International gathering here in Minneapolis. If you could talk a little bit more about how often that takes place, how the location is chosen, and what is the relationship of that big gathering to these relationships? Are we thinking about using that convening strategically to either refreshen conversations with some of the sister cities that have maybe died out, or, what are we thinking about that?
Sure. The umbrella organization of Sister Cities is called Sister Cities International. It's a nonprofit located in Washington, D.C. City of Minneapolis is a member of that organization, and through that membership that is paid through our office, all of our sister city organizations are members of Sister Cities International. Our organization bid on hosting their conference and was successful in getting the bid, so that organization will meet here in July this year, the 17th through the 19th. And we'll have about 550 people, a lot of elected officials, mostly from the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, but also internationally will be here. And we have also extended an invitation to our sister cities to attend this conference. We have confirmations from a number of them. Some are sending student groups, some are sending elected officials, but we're going to use that as a chance to engage a number of those people that haven't been here for a while. So company is coming, and we have a host committee that is, in fact, meeting on Saturday. They meet monthly to help plan and make sure that Minneapolis shines while all these folks are in town in July.
Thank you. I am not seeing other questions. I guess I would just say I really appreciate this report and the thoughtfulness with which our city staff, along with the Meet Minneapolis staff, approach sister city relationships. And these are really important relationships, and we want to do the job right and respectfully and keep the relationships going. And I think there are a number of things that have happened in past years to help refine our process. One of these was setting up a more useful and common list of criteria with which we evaluate requests for sister city relationships, and among other things. And so I think we've been trying in recent years to really have a process that is understood by the public of how we have tried to maintain and look at these relationships for now and for the future. So I'll look forward to when this report comes back, and I think our motion right now is to approve this recommendation to temporarily postpone the creation of any new sister city connections and direct staff to A, evaluate the number of sister cities that Minneapolis currently has and the capacity to have more, B, evaluate the engagement and involvement of the sister cities Minneapolis has at the current time and whether these relationships should be continued, and C, explore other options, including tiered status or other reviewed mechanisms for sister city connections. And so I'll see, is there a discussion? Seeing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, and that item is approved. And with that, I believe we have concluded with our agenda for today, and we are adjourned. Thank you very much.